Hi, everybody. David Nour back with you with Randy Seidel in the sales community for another episode of the Tech Sales Insights Live. Hello, Randy.
Hey, Nour. How you doing?
I'm good. It's good to be back. Glad to see you didn't burn the place down. Last couple of weeks I was gone.
Well, we tried. We had a couple snafus, but somehow we barely survived without you. But certainly fantastic to have you back. In your 2-week motorcycle ride out west sounded amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just wrote an article about the great unplugging, and it's a big and I wrote 10 lessons that I'll post in the sales community that might be really useful for our audience as well. We're joined by a friend, Ed Walsh, CEO of ChaosSearch. Hello, Ed.
Hi, nice seeing you guys. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. It's good to have you. For those that may not know as much about you, can you start our conversation with a brief introduction, kind of where you've been, what you've done, and how you professionally have gotten here?
So his intro could take the whole hour, so we'll give him a few minutes. But
Condensed
all the
version.
people I know, he's got just amazing in terms of doing great at a big company like IBM, and then now recently, which we'll find out more about, very small startup, ChaosSearch, and scaling that up. So this is going to be fantastic. Sorry, Ed.
No. Well, you just said. So I'll give a quick intro, but people do, once I go through it, you'll see it's a little eclectic. I've done large and small. I always get a question, am I a big company or a startup guy? And you'll find it kind of even. The second half of my career has been even between big companies like IBM and EMC and startup community. So it's 9 years and 10 years. So it's very close. But listen, I started my career at EMC, ran out of cash for college. I went back to college. I found myself starting a company with my old boss from EMC, a company called Berkshire Computer. Great $0 to $88 million company. I didn't build the team, but the team I was part of the team growth. I was a first salesman. In fact, I always carried a bag. And then to be honest, even I carried a bag to the very end. Even as I was running different groups, I've always, and that's where I cut my teeth in sales. I grew that for 14 years, started as a OEM for Digital Equipment Corporation to a reseller to professional services to managed services. Great fun. I call it the glory days because of the team. My wife, of course, girlfriend at the time, says, "What are you, crazy? You work like a dog." Loved it. And then I'll speed up a little bit. We sold that company to a company called CNT, Computer Network Technologies, in 2001. That was, if Berkshire Computer was my undergrad in business, that was my MBA. The CEO there kind of took me under her wings in a true mentorship, kind of more structured mentorship first in my career. I owe him. Of course, it didn't feel great all the time, but basically small, public company. We grew at 2x in 3 years, but it was a really difficult time. They were one of 4 players in the fiber channel switching and storage extension market, and Cisco, the gorilla, comes into the market. So we focused on having a strategy to kind of consolidate. We called it the Prince strategy. If you know anything about Harvard, it's actually the chimp strategy, but no one wants to really execute a chimp strategy. So we were the Prince. How do we consolidate? We bought up InRange, merged with McData. I almost had to go with Brocade. Eventually became Brocade, but it got delayed because if you know the history, their CEO got a little trouble and kind of disappeared. But it was great exposure with the blessing of, excuse me, with the 2 CEOs. I went on to go back to startups. So I got engaged by Benchmark and Lightspeed to be CEO of a company called Avamar. Avamar was the first company to put dedupe type of software into enterprise backup recovery. It really kind of revolutionized that industry. But I'm going to go fast, but each one of these has a story. They all look easy from the outside, but there's a lot of work. It's all about driving the right innovation, product market fit, get the right team, and you got to execute for scale. But that ended up being with EMC. By the time I kind of got it straight 6 months later, we raced it up, 7x increase in revenue within a year, got frothy. EMC picked it up. It became Avamar inside as a brand inside EMC. By the way, another story there is how we had to completely change the product and the team as we went to EMC to fit with their culture. But again, stayed at EMC a little bit as GM of data protection, but then I went on to do other startups. I was brought into a Sequoia transaction. So Sequoia brought me into Storewise. One before that, Virtual Iron was a Bain Matrix company. It was virtualization management software. Grew at 7x in 3 years, and it ended up being acquired by Oracle, and it's now their OVM management. Then I got pulled into Sequoia into an opportunity at Storewise, which was the first time putting dedupe into primary storage. It was thought it couldn't be done. 12 years later, everyone does it, but it was a leading edge. Again, the right product, team, execution, It got frothy, and IBM picked it up, and it became not only a big product component for them, but a multi-billion-dollar brand for them inside their business. I stayed at IBM for 3 years. I loved it. Great culture. And they moved me around. I like small and large, and I learned from both. They're just different muscles. Actually, the same muscles, just used different ways. But I left and of course, I had a couple of lawyers ask me to politely stay out of the industry, and I was nice enough to say, okay, I'll politely stay out of the industry. And basically, I did a bunch of boards for a year, and actually being on a board of a company. The CEO ended up being exited, and lo and behold, I became the CEO of a company called Catalogic. It was backup recovery CDM that ended up being an OEM into IBM, and then an acquisition of the assets. And now that's part of IBM Spectrum Protect Plus. And then I did get a call to come kind of transform and kind of bring back and turn around the IBM storage portfolio. And we got a call from Tom Rosamilia and Ginny Remetti, and I think it was they were willing to make the right changes to get storage. And IBM storage at the time, once you roll up hardware software support, it's about a $6 billion P&L. It was struggling. It was third, really, if IDC, fourth player in storage at that time. It hadn't grown a single quarter in over 6 years, and it hadn't grown a year in over 8 years. And how do we do that? So again, the same process, right? Getting the right product, the right innovation, the right team, execution. Within 4 quarters, we got it back to growth, quarter to quarter, 4 years, 4 quarters in a row, made the year. And then you saw over the next 4 years while I was there, we made positive growth more than we lost, quarter to quarter. But we got it to a solid second place market share according to IDC in storage. But it was great fun. I had a great experience at IBM. Because I was about 8% of IBM's revenue, I was up the upper echelons with the right group. And I'll tell you, it's a great culture, great team. I was very happy there, doing well. But the fact of the matter is I came across something I couldn't pass up. It was hard to leave. But that brings me to ChaosSearch, where now I came across there's just unbelievable game-changing technology based on Boston. And I knew the technical founder, this guy, Tom Hazel. By the way, I didn't mention a lot of names because I'll always leave someone out, right? But this individual, Tom Hazel, I knew him before. In fact, he was with me with the company I sold to Oracle, and it always impressed me what he was able to build with his team. He came upon for the last 6 years building this platform, but game-changing, really delivering on the true promise of data lakes. And everyone in the industry is moving all their analytics into the public clouds, Amazon, Google, Azure, but they're doing all these different platforms. And as it scales, they're looking to consolidate. And ChaosSearch is the only platform from the ground up that allows you to index the data once, and then through open API access, use all your normal tools for search or SQL or machine learning, allowing you to consolidate that without any of the data movement and the challenges, which is a huge time, cost, and complexity. It's a huge opportunity. It's actually patented technology focused just on tech. They didn't focus on sales and marketing. I was really brought on to let's go raise money. Let's get the right team. That's what I've been doing the last 12 months. I got here last August, and we're in the middle of that ramp. But every single day, I kind of wake up and I'm pinching myself how good of an opportunity. It's just the perfect timing of the market, and it's really hard technology, and we're ahead of it. And of course, it's nice to have patented technology around it. So.
And I got to tell you, what an incredibly impressive background. And you're right, your LinkedIn profile or other things I've seen about you doesn't do it quite justice, because it seems like you've got the right formula for either picking really smart startups, infusing the right processes, and then you've got a knack for consistently exiting these very successfully to large brands. What do you attribute that to? Is it combination thereof? Are you really good at? I'm reminded of Moneyball, where you're scouting really good players early on. Talk about the secret to your success, if you will.
Yeah. So I will say it always looks lucky. And there's just a lot of hard work behind doing that. I have been very lucky in my career, and also I've come across the right team. It's all about getting the right team. But I do have a process, right? So everyone thinks I'm a take risks. I actually go out of my way to reduce my risk a lot. So I do have a kind of my dad used to always say, hope's not a plan. In other words, you got to have a plan. So I have actually fairly regimented way to look at companies, and then also my first 90-day plan. In fact, I read, Randy, I've been reading your book, by the way. It's been dog-eared so many times, but I love your first 90-day plan. Mine's very, very similar, by the way. But if you don't have a plan, take Randy's. But I basically, so Nick, I have a plan to understand the environment, make a decision. But then once I get there, how do I get the right, alignment, and reality is your friend. So I do have an overall process I do of how to pick them, and then it's all about team. You got to get will this technology win, and it's a man and moment, or I guess person and moment. Can you enter that environment and build up the right things to make that successful? And so that's always, it might be a good opportunity for someone else, but is it right opportunity for me and my skill sets at that moment? And you always want to be stretching yourself. So you'll see me constantly stretch into different areas. So anyways, I do have a process to it, right?
No, I love that. Talk about, and I want to give Randy a chance to jump in as well in a second, but talk about that team for a second. What are you looking for? What are you looking for? And I'm really curious. And if you could help our audience, and I would encourage you, Jesse's already jumped in, and I would encourage the audience to jump in with your questions, but I'm truly fascinated. Ed, someone's your background. You've seen a lot. You've worked with a lot of different type of investors.
Yep.
When you walk into a startup, what are you looking for? Where do you begin? Give us the ingredients of here's a right fit and where isn't a right fit.
Yeah. So what I would say is in order to look at these things, you look at less as if you're going to employ or their CEO or VP of sales. You got to look at it as an investor, right? So this is before I get there. So we should separate that from when I get there, right? So you have to look at investor. And what investors look at is early, it's team, then market, then product. And later it becomes more product, then the team and the metrics behind it. But you got to understand where they are on the journey. So I always like to focus on the product market fit first. It's where you'd always want to start in these particular cases. But then do you have the right team? Ask a lot of questions of the team. By the way, remember, I'm coming on to be a CEO, so I know I'm going to have to add to that team, but you're trying to assess where they got to and how much they can go. If you're coming as hey, I'm going to be an employee, you really have to assess that team, not only the founders, but the team around the table. Are they asking the right questions? Are they wearing blinders on? Do they actually know the problem they're trying to solve? And are they willing to take feedback? The worst thing you can find is defensiveness. If they're going to dig in their heels, you want someone that's willing to be a growth mindset and learn and drive. But anyway, so for me, it's looking at product market fit. It has to be a market. I've seen a lot of good products, but the market's not big enough. And then with market are they early in the market? Are they in the middle of the market or late in the market? They're all okay, but it means different things for you when you come in, what you have to do. Especially, maybe talk to the community. So a salesperson, right? So coming in, or VP of sales, if it's early, it means something very specific. You need to make sure you're really on the product market fit. Typically it's 0 to 30 people, but you're working directly, and every single day you're trying to figure out. It's a really good way to a lot of learning, and it's a great way to earn, but you got to be willing to do that. I like those. Also, I like the next stage, which is next say 50 to 100 employees. They have the right product market fit. They've executed, they have some metrics, but they've kind of started building it. Do I have a differentiated, compelling value proposition that's sustainable? Do I have the marquee accounts that are going to really help me get my name out and kind of drive it? Do I have the big brother relationships that are going to bring me into environments and drive it? Do you have the metrics, or do you have the efficiency to drive the business? All those questions line up. Are they early, mid, or late? So when I look at that if I'm trying to talk to your community, that's how you want to look at it. They're all good, but just understand a very different lifestyle for a VP of sales or a salesperson in a early stage. Let's figure product market fit. You're going to be working with the founder and trying to figure out every single day, compared to a little bit more structure, but still a little wild west. And you're going to have some product issues compared to, once you get someone, some of these startups that are real big companies, it's just as easy as to go to EMC. They have all that process laid, but your experience there is very different. So
Randy, let me turn it over to you.
Yeah. And I guess I just would add on to that too. It's probably, if you're in sales looking to go to a company, the funding that the companies have or have access to is kind of a big one as well, right? So just going back in the book, love what you said. So for those that don't know what dog-eared means, you maybe just kind of elaborate. And then as a commercial for the book, since you brought it up so well, folks at home, you can go to, it is on Amazon. There's kind of a little sketchy in terms of shipping, but you can definitely you can see, I think under my name, salescommunity.com/book. And a lot of people are getting them for their teams, but certainly for yourself, feel free. So
mine is signed and I'm auctioning it off. So it's up to $3 on eBay.
Yeah. Thanks. I don't know if you're serious, but dog ear, yeah. I'm sitting by the beach and I have nothing with me. I'm just folding over the papers. But after a while, I had so many dog ears, right? So, I mean, it's really the who's who. I'm a student of the game, right? So if you start going, John McCarthy put in Billy Swales, Billy Hogan. I mean, it's amazing, and they're really good. 1 or 2 page, sometimes 3. But it's I'll tell you, if you're a student of the game, I would run through this. It's like, and I know a lot of them, but even people I work with closely, I don't know if they'd give me this level of this is what I do. So the clarity is helpful, and I love how you put. If you don't have, I always talk about having a plan. If you don't have a plan, you should really go to Randy's section, which he tossed it on page 215, for God's sakes. It's at the very end of the deck. But anyway, it was actually very helpful. In fact, it reminded me to reach out to some people I haven't talked to in years.
And
so.
Joking aside with our audience, likewise, I've spent early part of my career in sales management. This thing is full of incredible insights and it's not a book report. It's from leaders who've done it. So the compilation that Randy and Tony have put together are just great nuggets from very different set of experiences. Randy, you had a question?
No, I just wanted to make sure we circle back on the book. So we got that done. So
got it. So let's go to Jesse's got one, a interesting perspective on Ed. A lot of sales training is based on, methods we've been using for a number of years. We keep trying to push old methods on younger and younger audiences. His question is, should sellers be trained like the rest of the world on how to use technology and tools as enablers of that sales team to do their job faster and better?
Yeah, I would say first, sometimes the age-old things work the best, right? And a methodology, each one of my sales teams use different methodology as long as they use one. Otherwise, you don't have common language. You don't know how to talk about a deal in a very specific way. So if it's Medic or others, I've seen Medic, my Chris Sweeney, my current VP of sales, is all over Medic, and that type of discipline is great. So first of all, the first part of the question is, do we do these old stuff? I think some of the old stuff is aged well, and it's 95% right. So I would do that all day long. And the second thing is all about the technology stack. In fact, if you see my team building out, we have onboarding about the technology stack and what you have at your disposal to reach people, especially in COVID times. We're not having the, let's go to a ball game and get lunch, but how do you reach out to people? But it's everything from marketing all the way through what you have BDR inside sales to what you can use, how to reach out digitally, tools like Gong. I could go through the technology tool stacks. Actually, back to your book, by the way, Randy, you have a section on some of those, methodologies. I don't care which one you pick for sales methodology, just pick one for God's sakes, and then be consistent. And then I think the question I think was good. It's all about technology now, and you have to use a technology. Otherwise, if you're just trying to pick up your Rolodex and call people, that's not working at all anymore. So we're all about that. In fact, when brought the new team in here, we probably had 8 different pieces of technology, but it wasn't thought through as a technology stack. And I think the team led by Courtney Plata and also Chris Sweeney, I don't normally name names but these are the current team. They're working together end to end to have the right technology stack, the right view, and everyone in the organization's enabled on that so they understand the full flow and what are the tool sets you can do to go after those things.
So it sounds great, and we'll jump into, we'll talk about RevOps in a second. I want to build on, so love that. You go into an early stage company, you're looking at an investor, kind of the team, the marketing, the product market fit, kind of where are they in their journey. Let's say you like the story, and now Ed, you're in. I just interviewed Michael Watkins for my Curve Benders podcast, and he's famous for writing the first 90 days. So, and you brought that up. Talk about that. Where's your focus in the first 90 days? There's a lot you can do. You're pulled in a lot of different directions. What do you choose to focus on, and where do you believe are kind of the most strategic priorities to really focus on in those first 90 days to set the right tone?
So first of all, the book, The First 90 Days by Michael Watkins, is the most common sense, step-by-step, easy read you could ever have. The transition, so me going into these companies, and it's people kind of, how do you do that? You have to have a plan. You have to write it down. Before you get there, what do you learn? When you get there, how do you set up? How do you understand the team? What are the A priorities? How do you get the early wins? How do you get alignment of the team? By the way, this is right out of the book, right? I reread that book before I go into any opportunity. It's just a good level set. So you mentioned the book. I would give that to any new CEO when I see them. I said I use it every time, so don't take offense to it, but it's kind of the Bible. So and of course I have my own little adaptations to it. But for me, you have to have a plan, how to learn. And then, and I would do this, especially you said earlier in some of your casts about, CROs have a very short lifetime. I think a lot of it is because they're not doing the transition right? They come in and it's a crucible. There's a lot of heat and pressure being applied, and it either comes out as a great alloy or it comes out like ash. I think you need to focus on it. And that book specifically allows you to have a process that you can go through, and it's really common sense to do it. So making a long story short, I think you have to have a 90-day plan. You have to do, you have to have the right conversations to get alignment. And then from there, it's about getting the right butts and seats. As a CEO, it's about never running out of cash, raising money at good valuations, right? Randy said that as far as valuation, but then it's getting the right team, get the right butts in the right seats, and make sure those butts are doing the right things every single day. It's not me overriding it. It's just, if you hire the right people, everything works and you look extremely lucky. If you have the wrong people, your life is a nightmare and it's not going, trust me. So you got to get the right team, and you're always working, how to do that. And then you have to get them focused. So the way I get focused is basically, hey, what's the right strategy? And I do this early when I have a minimal team. As I build team, I constantly tear this up every single quarter year, but I have a cadence. Yearly get them offsite, quarterly get them offsites. Every single time it's what's a 3-year plan, what's a 1-year plan, what's a quarter plan. Now let's focus on the quarter. What's the next 90 days? What's our key focus areas? Get to the 1 to 3. You like to get to 1, but 1 to 3. And then what's everyone around the table? What's your 3 to 5 things you need to do in your team to make sure that we meet our goal together? And then you meet every single week to go through some matrix, and we actually meet every single day, right? So it's a quick check-in, 15 minutes with my team. Keep the team communicating. And if you do that, what you can do is, that works in large companies and small companies. It's the old agile software development getting together. You keep everyone aligned on the right topics. But you need the right team. That with the right team is really powerful. And then that kind of comes out, what's the right process? How do you deal with issues? How do we bring them up in these, again, weekly or quarterly meetings? What are the issues? How do we, efficiently work down them? And you end up with the right model. And if you do that as a cadence and you have the right team, things kind of go your direction. Now, that might seem like a lot, but it's not hard.
It sounds like incredible discipline. And as you mentioned, the cadence to make sure you're not just created at the onset, but really nurtured as we go. Randy, over to you.
Yeah, so from a 90-day plan, you'd mentioned, for CEOs, but I would argue going all the way down to individual contributors or SDRs. And I think too many times companies don't do this at all. So I always encourage people, if you're, a new rep, SDR, or experienced rep, or first line, second line, third line manager, really to kind of have that plan. And it's really a lot of different flavors. But if I cater it on a individual contributor, if you're going in, okay, what are the objective metrics and benchmarks you got to learn? You got to know the insurance and the programs, kind of everything else. But okay, what are those pipeline goals? What are the training goals? What are the partners? What are the customers? What are the relationships? And then how do you make sure then after 2-3 months, then you are kind of off and running? And at the same time, that also forms a good basis for kind of promotion, which then, weaves into, okay, hey, I'm here going, not that after 3 months you get promoted, but, it's an ongoing cadence to say, okay, what are the objective metrics that I should be focused on beating? So that way I'm viewed kind of top in the right in the quadrant in terms of what you're doing and how you're doing it. And too many times that I'm sure we've both gone into companies where all of a sudden, you get there, somebody's been there for 2, 3, 4 years. Everybody knows the person's bad. It's like, well, we should have gotten rid of him or her in first 3 months, forget about after 3 years, right?
And I completely agree. And I would say for everyone, I've mostly, and maybe I should do it differently, I've been giving it to people joining any big role because I think that transition, but you're right. I think the exact same technology goes for, I gave it to my daughter who just started out of school at Deloitte, right? This is how I look at the world. You should have that plan. And then in it talks about these 5 conversations you have about setting expectations. Actually, the more I think about it, when you said that, I was like, that's a perfect 5 conversations you need to be having as a new employee, right? What's the situation? How do I view it? Do we look at the right priorities? What's my, early wins I can work through? What's a resource I need? get coaching? How do I get advancement? Right. So those are all the right conversations you need to have. So I never thought about it as a good manuscript for getting started. But I agree. I've been using that book since, 2005, probably.
So let's build on that. Ed, you
It
come
was
in.
really a long time ago. It was before that, but you just don't want to say it.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you, and people say, well, you read a book. It's like, no. These frameworks, just pick one, right? It's like the sales method. For God's sakes, pick one. Try to make it as best you can and get everyone to use the same thing. This is the same thing. It's like, hey, you have to figure things out. You need to negotiate for success. You got to figure out the A priority. It just gives you a way to do that and not skip steps. And sometimes you're moving, let's face it, you jump in and zing, 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 things are going, and you got to keep your balance. And boy, 90 days matter, and most of the time I try to do it. And Randy, you might do the same, but I try to hide my team from the board. I hope my board member's not watching this for the first 90 days. Why? Because part of the failure of coming in is they get a question and they zing, 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 they answer the question and they don't really know. They haven't gone through the full learning. They haven't come in and really understood and set that up. Or they haven't taken the time with the board or me to say, what is the right A priority? Am I seeing the situation right? This is what I'm going to do. Is that the right A priorities? How to get and are you getting the right early wins? So I try to, in general, hold my team away from the board so they get their feet on, and then they end up having a better starting point with the board. And that would be the same thing for individuals. It's how you get engaged with your boss. The one thing you don't want to do and start it is being quiet. I'm the CEO. I want to talk to every one of my employees. I mean, we're up to 86 employees. I want to talk to them. I want to engage with them. You don't want to hide, right? And which is one of the plans. How do you have a strategy to learn and get into the organization? So
let's talk about that a second. You've gone from, and again, this is why your background is so fascinating. You've gone from early stage companies, you've built them, you've created scale, critical mass, scale, and exit, and then you've stayed with a larger entity. Yep. We've got a lot of members in the sales community that either are working for a large company and Ed, they're really curious about a startup, or they're in a startup and they're thinking, man, if I go to a larger company, a lot of the headaches I have now just wouldn't be there. Talk a little about the differences between those cultures and what were the most kind of visible differences when you go from a startup to a large organization and vice versa.
That's a real good conversation. So the first time I sold a company to a big company, I lost about 50% of my employees within 6 months. It was terrible. And after that, I've been pretty good at communicating. So I'm going to get to it. It's like trying to explain to startup people what a big company is going to be like and why it could be positive. So I'll go on that theory and I'll try to come back. And then I think the grass is not always greener. But for a startup person, so maybe that's not the right tack with you. What my talk was all about is we look at things differently. A big company, even a large startup, is going to be more structured. You're going to have very specific things you need to do. You're going to have to follow the policies. And that sounds like I'm being negative, but for that structure is really good for a lot of people, but you can't fight that structure. I've seen startup people try to go, and I'm not going to use Lotus Notes. Like, trust me, you're going to use Lotus Notes. Don't complain about it. Just go with it. Right. Same thing in a startup. Like, it's different. So you're not going to have the same structure. Now, is structure what you like? Well, hey, give me my, 18 value proposition. Give me my well understood customer, journey from POV to production. It might not be there. You might actually help put it together. So the best way I would say is, and I think startups, you have to say early, mid, late is very different experience. So you might like one of those and you're not going to like the others. If you want to come to a startup, I'd say just understand, no matter what startup you're in, know how good it is. It's hard, but try to find a good startup. I know it's hard. We'll figure out how to do it, but good startups, it's a great way to get acceleration of your career. As these things grow, the vacuum just is there. And if you might not be qualified for the next role, but they'll let you come in and then you can blossom. There's so many, Randy, in our network, so many examples of that. At EMC alone, in the early days, you saw it, there was a vacuum and then people could jump in and they would never have been hired from the outside, but you get that opportunity. You're not going to necessarily get that at a bigger company, but come with it and you're going to learn real fast, but comes with it, it's on you. It is a 7x24 role. Not that, sales in a big company is not a full-time gig, but it's a different role. So I look at startups as it's a great way. I'll tell you what I tell my daughter: go to a big company, get trained for the first 3 to 5 years, get a good basic, someone's going to invest in you, or I'll find you a really good startup that's going to do the same thing for you, but not all startups do. And get the basics, and then I'll tell you, the world's your oyster. And then maybe I try to bring this together for you. Grass is always greener. They're different. I think you have to actually look at startups as small, medium, large. They are so different, and what you're going to experience day to day, and the thrill you're going to get or the terror you're going to feel is so different between those. And it's nice to go through the phases. And then big companies, I think you get really good process. People are willing to, they want to have new things, but if you're not at a certain level of big company, sometimes it's hard to change the company. I enjoy my time as a GM at IBM running the 8 billion much more than I enjoyed, VP of marketing in the same organization.
Got it. Randy, over to you before we go to Jesse for another question.
Yeah. And you said the grass is always greener. I assume you meant the grass is not always greener.
Yeah, everyone always feels it, and sometimes it's an emotional. You should just check, what are you going to do that for? And in fact, I've heard you say that. I've heard other people. That's why I always tell people, just what are you going for? And then think, and everyone talks about Ben Franklin, this startup to that. I go more to, what is that startup like, and are you going to fit well to that? Is that what you want to do day to day? And that's why I try to go into what stage is a company at, because they're very different. I don't know if that makes sense.
And a lot of times too, for the listeners, because I want to leave or this or that, like, okay, well, what are you leaving? Why are you leaving? Fix kind of where you are now. So if there's issues around comp or territory, whatever it is, have you really asked? Have you really escalated? So if there's some easy fixes, it's always easier to stay where you are than move. And then half the time when people are, hey, okay, I'm leaving or already decided. And then the management team says, or manager says, well, geez, I could have fixed that. I could have fixed that. And then it's kind of too late because they already committed, kind of everything else. So, I always say, hey, try and fix where you're at now. Still great to look around, but kind of fix where you're at now to make life easier and better where you are now. I
completely agree. You have to have those conversations and do it ongoing. You try to not do it when you're fed up with things. And especially as a startup, we're looking for that type of feedback in that environment. Now, big companies, maybe less about some of that feedback, right? But you don't make an emotional thing. It's a logical thing. And then these can really help your career. The wrong moves can hurt you too, right? Sometimes being at a long company, I've seen so many people, they stay at the one company and they progress and they kept pushing. They get the right mentorship. They get the right sponsorship. They get the leadership. They go. It's a great way to build an unbelievable, you end up in the same spot, right? But it's how you want to build your career. Don't jump too much, right? But make some strategic moves in your career, but have a plan. And then listen, startup is great, but it's not for everyone.
So on that note, and for our audience, if you've joined us late, you're listening to Ed Walsh, CEO of ChaosSearch. Brilliant backgrounds, built several startups, very respectable kind of venture capital partners and backers, and then exited them to very large, very recognizable, reputable companies. Jesse's got a question. What are the top qualities you look for in a sales leader to run a startup?
So first I look at my team and I look at what I have for the right product, and I need the right person, the person for that moment, man and moment, but of course, gives diversity, the person in the moment. And just like I look at a company, am I going to be in that company and make the change? So I do look for someone that has success in the particular markets or the particular type of selling I want them to do. Am I a SMB? Am I enterprise? Am I SaaS? Am I on-prem, off-prem? Am I enterprise? Am I going after DevOps teams? So it matters to me because when they come in, I'm looking for them to bring that. Also, I do look for if I have blind spots. I've done a lot of things, but I try to be self-aware. I try to also bring in my leadership to match that. So then on specific qualities, so I look for I don't just say, let's go find a VP of sales. I said, this is what I want in that person. And I have a checklist because there's you can find a lot of good candidates out there. And how do you make the right call? They could all do the job, but who's going to have that special bit to get going? And then I always look for someone that knows how to build an engine, small or large. I'm not normally the guy trying to go from 0 to 10, right? So I'm trying to go and scale. And you can see pretty easy by a couple questions, does that person understand an engine, or are they going to go off and be more organic sales? I need someone that understands it. I don't need them to understand the whole process, marketing and SDRs in. They typically know enough to be dangerous, but I don't need them really understand, but I need them to go out and drive an execution strategy. Because as a venture-backed business, it is about, okay, if you get that, I'm going to give you X million, do that. Okay, now I'm going to give you 10X that, do 10X that. If you don't have an engine, you're done. And that's what I look for most. So that ends up being a general, right? Someone that can actually go bring in the right team, hire the right team, and get the right engine behind them and drive it. Of course, you want ethical. You're looking for someone that gets along with you and the team. I always cross-interview the marketing team and the VP of sales. Like I was hiring both simultaneously, and I had them meet each other. Now, why? It's one thing if you like each other. There's always going to be this give and take of how do you balance out the different things for sales and marketing. But if they really respect each other, look at the world similarly, it's going to work. I wouldn't say that's a have to be, but it's a nice to have. And then I'd also bring that into client success. So the person that understands the engine end to end. So I do look for like people that have been successful in that particular spot. And I'm always looking for someone that's engaging you, asking a bunch of questions. But you're looking for success. And the biggest thing is, will this person be the right fit for my team? And the culture of the team is more important than the individual. I've had great VP of sales that were just, for some reason, they just couldn't play well. That just doesn't work. I don't think it's ever worked. In big companies, it can work, but not in small companies. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely. Randy, let me go to you, and then I'm going to ask a follow-up question I've had.
Sure. What about the importance of not just understanding direct, but indirect as you go to market, experience there, as well as just relationships in general, whether it's customers and users, partners, joint go to market partners?
No, so I do. And when I was looking for what do I need, I try to say, am I going to be direct channel? Am I going to be SaaS-based business? Is it going to be with big integrators or not? And then I look for that person. I want someone that understands that selling motion, has relationships, but I don't have to have, but you don't find everything in a particular person, right? You're looking for enough in the way you kind of gauge, but I do look for exactly that. Like, there's always this, everyone wants to be the CRO. I can do it all. I understand everything. But the way they brought up, typically there are direct people, there's indirect people, there's SaaS, is kind of more recent. But if you haven't done it, the selling motion is so different that either you need to say, I'll bring this person on, but I'm going to have to make sure this person gets on with the program. And you're much better find what's the right check boxes and go. And align, direct versus indirect is huge. But now I think is that actually the SaaS selling motion is dramatically different for a lot of people in the backgrounds. So.
One of the conversations we had was around the unfortunate demise of the CRO after 12 to 18 months, right? That son of a gun, or that person is just not cutting it. Let's get rid of them. What do you attribute that to? Why that short of a tenure? And you've got some great experience from your startups and the IBM days. And what do you would love to hear your lens on that shortened tenure?
And I won't mention names, but if they're listening, so I have worked, by the way, as your salespeople go and your sales executive goes, you go. So if they stumble or they get somehow the board or the senior management of the big company gets down on them, your life is miserable. When you have the right person, it's easy. When you don't have the right person, including the pressure and the time you have to do to try to help them. So you try to have them in advance. What I see people doing at big companies and small companies, they don't understand that it is different to go in front of a board or to go and find an executives. And what they're looking for is they're looking for someone that has a plan and being consistent. The one kiss of death is you run into that thing before you prepare, before you go through your 90 days, before you have everything figured out, and they're going to ask you a basic question. So how's the quarter going? And you're going to answer with the best idea you can. And then it's not your fault, but that's your first 2 weeks of the job. You realize, whoa, this isn't working. That's this, I got to fix this and this before I can get to that point. Well, the board or the senior management doesn't remember that. They just say, yeah, this guy, he said this and he did something completely different. And you get off the wrong foot. So to me, sorry to go back, the book, The First 90 Days. Now, I also go out of my way, and I'll give you an example in big company and small company, but basically, if you don't have a plan to how does a VP of sales get in a situation either with executives above them at a big company like IBM, like Ginny, I've been pulling in front of Ginny Rometty with my VP of sales, and it's a disaster because they're just trying to answer the question instead of being kind of thoughtful. And then what happens is you survive that one meeting, but the next meeting's horrendous because what you said is not really based upon the facts. So you got to slow down to move faster. You have to have a plan. So the first 90 days, let me focus on the start first. I go out of my way to not let my VP of sales and VP of marketing or any VP coming in to meet the board. And boy, the board wants to meet them. So I'll come in and I'm going to cover the numbers to my VP of sales. No, and by the way, it's not just, I'll say across my hair, this isn't about one of my VP of sales. I can handle this. I can, and I'm like, no, you don't understand it. I do this for everyone. I need to buy you the 90 days so that you can go through it. And I might have to give you either with me, are we agreeing on the situation? Are we agreeing upon the 8 priorities? Are we agreeing upon the early wins that are going to set you up? And is that consistent? Or sometimes a CEO doesn't have that relationship with the board. You need to have it with the board members yourself. So maybe the first board meeting is doing that. But the kiss of death is you jumping in and you're just jumping in. You've got to go through 90 days. You have to say nothing. Try your best to not answer. So when I go over the sales numbers, the first 2 board meetings when my VP of sales is there, everyone's like, wow, I got it. I can't sit in my hands. I'm like, no, you need to do exactly that. Because anything you say is not going to be completely informed. You need your 90 days plan to figure this out. The idea of a 90-day plan is it actually takes time to figure out and get some momentum. And then your first impressions, your hypothesis coming in, you try to test it. They're 90% right, but 10% woefully wrong. I've been in companies that was a sales execution. Everywhere was a sales execution problem. Not at all. I had to stop shipping product for 90 days in the first 30 days. It was product, right? So you need to give yourself time. So net, what I think the biggest challenge is you have to think, get the book first of all, but have a strategy and the interfacing up front. How do you have the conversations about what is the situation? Am I thinking about right? How are you thinking about it? This is the steps I'm going to take. Here's a little priorities. And you get that cycle of, hey, I met with him. He's very thoughtful or she's very thoughtful. By the way, we talked about it. I gave my feedback and he took the feedback or she took it. Things changed and he adapted with that change compared to, the guy said this and he did that. You got to have a process. And I see big companies, really good lifelong executives that have been in sales, but they haven't been into what I'll say the corner office to get grilled. It's a different world. And your boss needs to make sure that don't run over, one of the person in your book, to go back to your book, I think it was Chris Riley. He says, good leaders don't run people over the bus, but they try to get you out of the way of the bus. That's exactly the role of a leader. And it depends on who your leader is. Are they going to help you or do you have to help yourself with a plan? And if you don't, you within 90 days, you've already lost your credibility. In the first bump, you're in trouble. And it's hard to get the credibility because now things haven't gone to plan. And the first plan that you spotted out was wrong from the beginning. You've lost all. Does that make sense? I think it's this first 90 days is so critical and no one has a strategy to do it. And it's, anyway, to me, that's the biggest thing you have to do.
No, I was going to tell you, a board member recently told me that he has a very strong line of sight into whether that executive is going to be there or not in 6 months after their first conversation.
So
because the question
have that first conversation really thoughtful. It's not just showing up, hey, I'm here. Ask me about the quarter and I'll kind of give my best guess. I mean, that's exactly what you don't want to do. So your example, and they remember, and you can't say, well, I learned something out. It just human nature doesn't let you do it, right? First impressions.
And he also said that first conversation gives me a very good glimpse on how much time, effort, attention, energy I'm gonna have to spend on that person to get the results, get the outcomes we're after. And it lends itself really well to your comment of want to make sure that those executives kind of have their ducks in a row before you do that. So Randy Seidel, I'm about to put down a challenge on you.
All right.
You've seen some great sales leaders. You've got some phenomenal ideas in this book. Before we go to Izhar and his question, I want to know from you 5 steps. You're the brand new CRO in a company. 5 steps you go through, and don't rattle off 37 because I know you've got them. What are the top 5 things you're looking for as you go into a new company?
So this would be evaluating the company?
Yeah, as you going in. So you've just been hired as a new CRO.
Okay, hired, okay.
What are the 5 things, the top 5 things you're looking at, you're spending time, effort, focus on?
Yep. So for those that know me is I could actually make this easy and just say 1, sales calls, right? So in today's day and age, whether it's Zoom, but you go on sales calls, and if that's kind of the umbrella theme, what happens is in the old days, it would be kind of windshield time, right, with somebody. But by doing that, you're going to get to see and have purview into, and then I'll maybe have the 5 things under that, but you're going to have, kind of the customers. What's the value prop? How do they like it? Are they buying? Have they had issues? Talking and meeting with partners, right? What do they think? Is there a good value prop for them? Are they making money? Do they like to sell it? How do they think about it? The sales team, what do they say? Do they have a fair quota? Do they have a fair comp plan? If you don't have fair quota and comp plan, they probably aren't going to stick around, right? What's the feedback from all of those in terms of things that you can do different or better? So I'm kind of a person, I'll say, of the streets. So it's, kind of getting your butt out there. And if you lead by example on sales calls, then if you can do, I'll say, 10 or, in the old days of face-to-face, it would be kind of do, 10 a week. And now with Zooms, you can certainly do a lot more than that. But if you're doing that, then anybody under you should be doing the same thing.
Got it. So get out in the street, sales calls, partners, customers, then what?
All right, so you're letting me go more, but I'd say it's the feedback around that, what you're learning. So, with Ed's, kind of the first, 30 days, you're assessing, you're getting feedback, what's the ideas, and, any great leader kind of comes in with a playbook. They could probably rinse and repeat, but, the best actually listen and get the best ideas. So as leaders, we're, I always say I'm not smart enough to think of everything, but you certainly get a lot of great input. So how do you kind of figure out what's a must-have versus a nice-to-have versus a no or a parking lot, and then those must-have suggestions, then you weave in. And by the way, as you're pivoting and doing these new things, you compliment Johnny and Susie and Sally. Hey, this is, I was there in, Sacramento on the sales call, and they said this, and, this partner here, IIS in New York told me that, and here's what we're doing based on that. And then it helps promote the culture of kind of giving and getting feedback, bringing up ideas, because they know they're actually going to be listened to. Because many times in corporate cultures, they're not listened to, and they're not, they're asked for, but nobody does anything with it.
Love it. So let me real quickly for our audience paraphrase. A good friend and a former client, a guy named Dennis Sadlowski, talks about outside-in leadership. And that's exactly what Randy just talked about. Not much happens in Mahogany Row. It's in the mailroom, and it's in the street, and it's go get on front of the customers. And those insights from customers and partners will tell you a lot about the product, will tell you a lot about the team. I captured the playbook of the team, the tools, and the engine. Is this a repeatable, predictable kind of engine to scale, as Ed has alluded to? So let's go to Izhar. We've got a great question here. How do you get a small startup engineering-heavy founders to listen to sales, especially since initially it's more about getting references on not necessarily revenue?
Good question. So actually, and Izhar knows this pretty well. So this can be a challenge, right? So and especially early. So back to where you are in the company journey, early it becomes hard. I always tell my teams, I'm going to bring on an enterprise sales team, and they're going to drive us to drink. And I say it right in front of the management team and the sailors, and say, but it's what we need. They're going to ask for things, and the fact of the matter is going to be the right things, but they're going to drive us crazy. So one is I'm setting expectations right up front. They're going to be asking for things that you're not used to or you're not comfortable necessarily doing. And you have to do that. And that's everything from how you engage, what's the process, the tools, how are you going to deal with customer situations. And so one, I set the tone, it's going to be different. And then typically I'm between the two, kind of marching. I think I understand. And so it's having the right, if you have a technical founder, hopefully you have a business person that has some sales capability in the background, understands it and bridges it, because it's not ganging up on the technical founder. It's okay, we both know what we need to do. You can fill in the gaps for some, but it's getting everyone to row a slightly different direction they did when it was just them doing sales calls. So to me, it's getting the right team, and then it's just communicating through it. And it is the biggest thing of the early startup. So if that kind of wigs you out, you're not going to get heard by the founder. The founder wants to do it exactly their way, and they don't understand sales, and they're getting in my way, but they're still in every single sales call. Well, that's an early startup phenomena. If that really bothers you, don't go to early startup. You're on to the next phase, which they've typically wrinkled out, ironed out those issues. Does that make sense? Now later. Go ahead.
And I was going to say, I often tell people the first 30 days is a pretty good indication of what you're going to get. First 90 days is exactly what you're going to get from that technical founder or engineering heavy led team.
But it's in my role, and it would be, if you're the VP of sales, it's your role to communicate through that and make sure that your team's getting the right everything they need. And it's a big list. I use a term, it's going to drive you a drink. It's going to be hard, but we're going to have to do it. And then it's a journey. So.
Got it. Randy, over to you.
Yeah, and Ed, I'm sure you've seen the same movie too, but I've had, lots of times where the engineering centric CEO or the engineering team says, oh, well, the customers are stupid, they don't understand. And I said, well, you don't understand. Guess what? You get paid, you're here because you get paid. And guess what? We get our money from the customers actually paying money. So they may be stupid, you may disagree, but it's the product market fit. And then other perspective would be around whatever kind of the company's using for kind of a product management, funnel and getting the feedback, right? So it's great to get all the feedback in, but there has to be a set process, and there's got to be somebody or somebody, some team that's actually going to be making the decisions on, what are these new releases or the new add-ons that you're going to be making to the roadmap.
Yeah. And both sides needs to slow down and listen to the others, because it is kind of a cultural clash. But again, I mean, there's so many times is that like you said, the customer is using it wrong. That happens so many times early market. And that's a little blind spot. If you see that, you've got to really dig underneath it, because more than one of my companies, I had to get around that particular blind spot, and it ended up being, call it a really bad feature or a really bad product that until we stomp that out, we never move forward as a company.
We've got a great question from Michelle. Ed, in this, particularly in this time of looking for diversity, not just ethnic and gender, but cognitive. Michelle's got a great point. Out of the 150 private unicorns, there are 15 CROs that are female. What do you do to get more? What can we do to get more amazing female leaders into sales? And then specifically reference to the corporate bros prevent women from joining.
Okay, I think that's good. So diversity is kind of critical. Listen, I'm not perfect, but wherever I've been, I've both on every layers, from the executives, the board, but also down to the management on sales, down to sellers. I probably always brought females for sure. And now it's even a bigger inclusion statement that I think is, almost a male or female. If you haven't figured that out, you kind of have to get with the times. So what I do is, like, for instance, I hired a male VP of sales this time. Now, why did I do that? Well, again, I looked at a bunch of different people, and the right person for the role I had to find. But I do ask that person, what's your team makeup? And, and I've never told this to my VP of sales. He let me know his structures of the team. He had really strong female leadership and female sales. And lo and behold, by finding the right person, lo and behold, guess what I have? I started with, there's one person in the company when I got here, and now it's 40% of the overall company. My sales team is probably, I'm trying to do, and they're really strong, capable. So when you need to find the right leader that does it, if they haven't done the past, I'm not saying they're never going to do it, but it's harder. It's kind of their bias. So that's what I do. And then I think it's mentoring, right? So I think it's well known. I think females are less likely to raise their hand and, on a job post that has I've done some of that. I don't do all of it. Well, we have to actually write a post differently to say, hey, if these are the things we're looking for, it doesn't have to have everything. I know that sounds crazy, but it's actually well understood inside the psyche. And when you get in there, you have to bring in the right people and mentor them. And also, I would say for females, it's less likely to ask for that mentorship. And I will also say, as I meet with different teams to kind of grow the overall, even IBM or in startups, is you got to foster it. But I've never turned down someone reaching out to me and say, hey, spend a little time with me, or a group saying, hey, do you mind getting a little co-chair with me? We're going to get all the women in the office that do it. Now, the reason I say that is now I do it proactively, but the fact of the matter is, it's kind of a blind spot. So I think I think you need to do it. We need to have a process to bring people in. We got to make it easier for them to get there. We got to have the right mentorship. We got to hire right and promote them from within. I don't know if that helps. I've done a good, so listen, I'm not flawless, but now I'm up to, from one female, I'm up to 40%, about a third of my executive team is female leadership. And there was no female leadership when I got here. So I think I got that. I think the bigger thing is diversity as well, which is a whole different inclusion statement. So, and
for Michelle, if you listen to any of the previous podcast episode, I specifically am reminded of Jennifer Haas that Randy and I interviewed, very competent CRO, EVP, and she talked about the 3 ships: mentorship, sponsorship, leadership. And I'm going to build on Ed's comment, as incumbent on competent, capable women leaders in tech sales, but not just women, the less represented communities to look for those, look for mentors, look for sponsors, look for leaders that are willing to invest in you and really help you and guide you through those increased responsibilities in the organization. Randy, let me go over to you.
Yeah, sure. And Michelle, thanks for the question. Definitely good. And other thought I had was real. Oh yeah. So in terms of the funnel, whether it's women or it's diversity, I think I'm big on, hey, we got to go back to the, college ranks, right? So you have to say, here's why for women, sales and especially tech sales can be a great outcome and is something you should get into because it may be something they, may not naturally, think about. But I think, there's some, you mentioned the mentorship, all that stuff to do now, but I think that, the problem or the opportunity and huge opportunity for companies goes back to say, hey, let's just get, the funnel bigger. And then that's going to help and impact, companies and, great jobs for, females and women, whatever, 10, 20, 30 years from now.
Ed, on that note, we're 18 months into this pandemic. Are there one or two trends you believe are going to have a profound or lasting impact on cloud, on storage, on tech sales?
Okay, so there's so many different ways to go. So I lived through the beginning of the pandemic at IBM, where we were not ready for remote selling at all. We were, really on-prem physical events. We ended up kind of getting everyone technology. So one is using technology in selling is a first thing. I think it's always been there, but it's kind of a tipping point. And the same thing with startups. Startups have always been ahead of that. So one, if you go through, that was kind of the selling environment. You got to you have to have the digital stack to go drive it. And you have to understand the end-to-end and what resource available to you. That's already was here before pandemic, but now, you have to be asleep and well below quota to not get that now. The other thing is, I think as far as technology, it's all about data. It's all about public cloud. I did a lot of on-prem and cloud. It's really hitting a tapping point. Now that might irk some people, where it's happening real fast. People that were hesitating doing things like the public cloud, it's just accelerating that. And you'll see those trends. You already saw it in the last year going in. And I think it's, what's old is new, but almost everything changed in the pandemic, and also nothing. I'm hoping to get back more hybrid. I don't think we'll ever be all back in the office. So I'm sitting in this is my cafe empty, right? We're going to be hybrid in the fall, hopefully, if this Delta virus plays out. But I think you want an environment and to kind of foster that personal connection, getting those conversations, having that spark. But it's going to be, how do you handle yourself remote? And you can do a lot of things with remote tools that you have to do.
So we've got a great question from Jesse, and this is one of those contentious ones. How do we hold marketing accountable? You've got unicorns that are on average spending over $1 million on ads to words. How do we measure the marketing performance? How do we hold the marketing team accountable?
And put in there, how do you view the kind of CRO function evolving, which is much bigger and broader than when it just used to be VP of sales?
Yeah. So I think the end-to-end engine is understood in a very broad way, the butterfly, right? So it comes in, you do a deal, and I'm in a SaaS business, and how you drive business after it, right? So the end-to-end, from what comes in the first touch for marketing, how do you reach out, broad audience, top of the funnel, march it down the funnel if you use inside team, SDRs, the technology tracking, how do you target the right ICP, all the way through. Then it gets in the seller's hand one way or another. How do they drive their own pipeline? How do they get and actually manage this end to end? So one, there's always a misunderstanding. And I don't think Jesse's saying this, but I always see the sales team, hey, those guys are out of control. What are they doing, right? And then the marketing is like, so what I want is people to and this gets to the CRL thing, truly understand the end to end. Marketing is understood. Everyone wants to be marketing. Or BD. Alliances is the other thing that's just completely misunderstood by everyone in the company. But there's huge roles. So one, I do by metrics. So I get the team together. We have metrics that we cover every single week. By the way, on a quarterly basis, we're getting offsite. What's the 3-year, 1 year? What's the 90-day plan? What's the metrics we're going to track? So it's everyone's open and honest where it is. And we have to keep everyone accountable. And you go along the entire thing, and sometimes it's stopped in sales. Sometimes it's stopped in marketing, but having the right metrics, right conversions, and the right dollars, but you have to have a balance. So when we look at it, is how much dollars we toss at the top of funnel, how many BDRs, because our model is heavily on the BDRs, and I'll take the top of funnel and bring it down to a meaningful meeting. And that's where it becomes a sales qualified lead. And if I don't spend enough on the top of funnel, if I don't have enough BDRs to do that. If I have too many BDRs and not top of funnel, they're sitting around doing nothing, or they're truly doing cold calling. No offense, cold calling. When's the last time you answered your phone when you didn't have to understand what people were calling you on, right? So you have to have the right balance. So one, understanding the whole game. So if you're in sales and say, what the hell, if you can spend more time, cross a chasm, and this gets to the CRO, very few people actually understand the entire process and the gives and takes. And you have to spend the time with the other person to understand their side. Because I think both roles, modern marketing is not like it was 10 years ago. It is scientific. It's driven by metrics. It's much more like a sales organization than you possibly know. And then that you have to understand that and how it plays all the way through. And that plays as CRO. And so I do by metrics. And by the way, it's not just one metric. It's along the funnel. How are they doing? Because you have to have the balance. It's not just leads. Okay, that's one metric. If you don't understand how it's coming down the funnel, and then what are the pinch points along the way, you're missing you can have a whole bunch of top of funnel and it never gets through, or you have nothing at top of funnel and you're starving. It doesn't matter. You need to think the whole thing through. And I do metrics. We cover it every single week as a team. I don't cover it with just marketing. As a team, we cover our metrics together. And those conversations come out naturally in that discussion.
For our audience, you've been listening to Ed Walsh, CEO of ChaosSearch. Ed, thank you for the gift of your time, for the insights. And again, kudos. Just hearing your background brings your LinkedIn profile to life of what you've done and the enormous success, and kudos to that. Randy, I want to give you the last word about Sales Community.
Great. Appreciate it. Thanks. Yeah. So this is brought to you by Sales Community. So for those that want to learn more and sell more, it's a fantastic site. Go check it out. And as we said a couple times today, the book's kind of a no-brainer. You can get that salescommunity.com/book. And Ed, thanks so much. We could have spent all day. So certainly look forward to having you back. And thanks so much for sharing the time with us and your fantastic wisdom.
No, really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
For our audience, we'll see you next Wednesday, same time. We've got some great guests lined up well into October. So we look forward to seeing you again. Take care, everybody.